Hi, welcome to Chapter 9. It is part 2 of Chimney Draft. So enjoy the videos. Talk to you soon.
Chimney height versus offset geometry. When offsets are used, effective height decreases because the chimney no longer has a continuous vertical rise. A 30-foot chimney with two offsets may perform more like a 20-foot chimney in terms of draft strength. The more the chimney deviates from vertical, the less effective height it has to generate upward pull. Offsets also create a practical inspection and cleaning challenge. Tools must navigate the bends, making it harder to properly remove creosote or debris. If the system is not cleaned effectively, deposits accumulate faster at offset locations, increasing fire risk. For this reason, NFPA standards recommend limiting offsets as much as possible and keeping each offset angle within acceptable limits, typically no more than 30 degrees from vertical when clay flue tiles are used. In addition, poorly constructed offsets can create ledges or misaligned flue tiles, causing smoke to strike masonry surfaces instead of flowing smoothly upward. These misaligned tiles create turbulence and heat stress points, and they are a common source of cracks and deterioration in older chimneys. Even if the tiles appear aligned from above, hidden misalignments inside offsets can disrupt flow enough to cause long-term problems. When diagnosing chimney performance issues, noticing multiple bends or offsets immediately raises suspicion. Smoking fireplaces, poor draft, lingering cold air plugs, and rapid creosote buildup all become more likely when the flue contains too many directional changes. The most reliable solution is always a straighter, more vertical chimney path. When offsets cannot be avoided, they must be limited, properly aligned, and paired with insulated stainless steel liners to reduce cooling and friction loss. The construction of the smoke chamber has a profound effect on chimney draft, and flaws in this area are among the most common causes of poor fireplace performance. The smoke chamber is the transitional space between the firebox and the flue. Its job is to take the broad plume of smoke from the fireplace and gently compress it into the smaller cross-sectional area of the chimney liner. To do this efficiently, the smoke chamber must be shaped, aligned, and insulated properly. When it isn't, draft becomes weak, turbulent, or inconsistent. One major issue is an unparged smoke chamber. In older construction practices, masons often left the smoke chamber with exposed brick and rough, stair-step surfaces created by corbelling inwood. These uneven surfaces disrupt airflow by creating turbulence. Instead of flowing smoothly upward, the smoke hits the ledges, swirls, and slows down. The NFPA and IRC require smoke chambers to be parged smooth with refractory mortar, which forms a streamlined, funnel-like surface. When parging is missing, fireplaces often smoke into the room, especially when first lit or when the fire is burning weakly, because the smoke chamber traps smoke instead of channeling it upward. The stair-step construction also creates pockets where smoke can stagnate and cool. As the gases cool, they lose buoyancy, which weakens draft even more. In wood-burning systems, these cooler surfaces also allow creosote to condense, building up dangerous deposits on the chamber walls. A properly parged smoke chamber eliminates these pockets and improves both safety and performance. Another problem occurs when the smoke chamber walls are too thin, especially on chimneys built against exterior walls. The smoke chamber is the hottest part of the system, and if the walls are thin, they lose heat rapidly to the outside air. This cooling effect lowers the temperature of the smoke, making it heavier and less likely to rise into the flue. A smoke chamber that loses heat too quickly is one of the biggest contributors to fireplaces that chronically smoke back into the home. Proper construction requires 8 inches of solid masonry, which helps retain heat and maintain the upward flow of combustion gases. Smoke chamber height also matters. If the smoke chamber is too tall, the smoke has a long distance to travel before it reaches the flue. The longer this transition space is, the more the smoke cools. A tall smoke chamber also increases the volume of air that must be heated before draft becomes stable. This delay often causes smoke spillage during fireplace startup. On the other hand, if the chamber is angled too sharply or too short, the smoke cannot compress properly into the flue opening. This creates a bottleneck effect that slows velocity and causes turbulent backflow. The IRC limits the smoke chamber walls to a slope of no more than 30 degrees from vertical to prevent this exact problem. The connection between the top of the smoke chamber and the bottom of the flue liner is equally important. If the smoke chamber is not built to perfectly match the position of the flue liner, the liner may be left unsupported on one or more sides. Unsupported tiles can shift, crack, or separate over time. This creates gaps that allow smoke to escape into the masonry structure or heat to transfer through the chimney walls, creating both draft issues and fire hazards. Misalignment also creates turbulence right where the chimney needs the smoothest transition. The size of the fireplace opening has a direct and often dramatic effect on chimney draft. Because the fireplace and flue must function together as a matched system, the opening must be properly proportioned to the size of the chimney liner. When the opening is either too large or too small, the balance between air entering the fireplace and gases leaving the chimney is disrupted. This balance is essential because draft depends on the chimney being able to pull smoke upward at least as fast as air is pulled into the front of the fireplace. When the fireplace opening is too large, the firebox pulls more air from the room than the flue can exhaust. The volume of air rushing into the fireplace face increases in direct proportion to the size of the opening. However, the flue area does not change. If the fireplace opening is oversized, the flue becomes overwhelmed by more smoke and air than it can physically evacuate. This imbalance results in weak draft, smoke spillage, and chronic smoking problems, especially when the fire is large or when the chimney has not fully warmed up. Large openings also pull more room air into the fire, which can cause faster cooling of the smoke before it reaches the flue, reducing buoyancy and making draft even weaker. The International Residential Code and long-established fireplace design principles compensate for this by requiring the flue cross-sectional area to be properly proportioned to the fireplace opening. Typically, a round clay flue must be at least 1/12 the size of the fireplace opening, while square or rectangular flues must be at least 1/10 the size. If the opening is far larger than these ratios permit, the fireplace becomes nearly impossible to draft correctly. This is why older or custom fireplaces built without proper proportions often smoke heavily, and why adding a smoke guard at the top of the opening can help reduce the air demand and rebalance the system. When the fireplace opening is too small, the issue becomes the opposite. A small opening restricts the amount of air available to feed the fire. Without enough combustion air, the fire burns cooler and more slowly, producing heavier, denser smoke. Cooler smoke has less buoyancy and does not rise as easily through the flue. In addition, the smaller opening restricts the pathway for smoke to enter the chimney, creating a bottleneck effect. Even if the flue is properly sized, the firebox may not be able to deliver smoke into the chimney fast enough. The result is sluggish draft, difficulty maintaining a strong flame, and an increased likelihood of the fire smoldering. A fireplace opening that is too small also contributes to poor air mixing at the throat. The throat area relies on an adequate volume of incoming air to help accelerate the smoke as it transitions toward the smoke chamber. If the opening is undersized, the draft must work harder to pull smoke into the flue, and the system becomes extremely sensitive to small changes in house pressure, outdoor temperature, or the chimney's level of warmth. A well-constructed smoke shelf plays a critical role in fireplace draft, even though it is often overlooked because it is hidden behind the firebox wall. The smoke shelf sits just behind the damper and beneath the smoke chamber. Its purpose is to catch falling debris and to help manage the airflow entering the smoke chamber. When it is properly shaped and correctly built, the smoke shelf acts like an aerodynamic stabilizer that smooths and redirects airflow, helping smoke rise into the chimney instead of spilling into the room. The smoke shelf helps draft by interrupting and diffusing downdrafts. When wind blows across the chimney top, some of that air can be forced downward. Without a smoke shelf, the wind-driven air would flow straight into the smoke chamber and push smoke back toward the firebox opening. With a smoke shelf in place, that descending air is deflected upward. The shelf creates a small turbulence zone that breaks the downward push and weakens its momentum, allowing the rising smoke to flow around it and continue upward into the flue. In this way, the smoke shelf helps stabilize draft during windy conditions and prevents momentary back puffing or smoke rollout. Another way the smoke shelf improves draft is by promoting a smoother transition between the firebox and the smoke chamber. The fire produces a large volume of warm gases that rise rapidly. At the point where the damper and smoke chamber meet, the space becomes more constricted. The smoke shelf helps create a buffer that allows the rising gases to expand, swirl slightly, and reorganize themselves before entering the tapered smoke chamber. When the smoke shelf is shaped correctly, curved gently upward and free of obstructions. It supports a consistent lamina upward flow. Debris, however, can severely disrupt this essential airflow. Dead animals, nesting materials, broken tile fragments, leaves, and other obstructions often accumulate on the smoke shelf because it naturally catches whatever enters the flue or falls down the chimney. A debris-filled smoke shelf changes the airflow dynamics dramatically by reducing the space available for turbulence management. Instead of gently redirecting downdrafts, the airflow becomes chaotic. Smoke can strike the debris, swirl, lose momentum, and spill back into the living space. Even a few branches, a bird's nest, or a clump of leaves can disturb airflow enough to cause noticeable draft reduction. Vegetation, such as vines entering through cracks or plant matter blown in from above, adds another layer of obstruction, often trapping moisture and causing odors. Dead animals, especially raccoons, squirrels, or birds, not only block airflow, but also introduce health risks, strong odors, and additional debris as they decompose. The presence of a dead animal can completely block the smoke shelf and choke the flue, preventing the fireplace from drafting entirely. In older or improperly constructed fireplaces, the smoke shelf may also be hollow rather than filled with heat-resistant grout. A hollow shelf creates an unwanted cold pocket that cools the rising smoke prematurely, reducing buoyancy and weakening draft. Proper construction calls for the shelf to be filled solid and contoured upward to help redirect downdrafts and preserve heat. A clean, solid, properly shaped smoke shelf is essential to chimney performance. It acts as a safety buffer, an aerodynamic transition point, and a thermal support surface. When the shelf is obstructed or poorly built, the entire system becomes vulnerable to smoke spillage, backdrafting, and unpredictable performance. Regular inspection and cleaning of the smoke shelf are therefore critical steps in maintaining a healthy draft and ensuring that the fireplace functions as intended. The condition of the firebox has a direct influence on how well a chimney drafts. Even though most people don't immediately associate damaged firebrick or deteriorated joints with draft problems, the firebox is the combustion chamber where heat is generated, and anything that weakens its ability to contain and reflect heat will reduce the temperature of the flue gases. Since draft depends on hot, buoyant gases rising up the chimney, anything that cools those gases or disrupts the fire's thermal efficiency will weaken draft. When firebrick is missing, the firebox loses its thermal integrity. Firebrick is designed to withstand and reflect intense heat back into the fire. It keeps the firebox interior hot, which keeps the smoke hotter as it rises toward the smoke chamber. When a firebrick is missing, the fire heats the surrounding masonry instead of radiating heat back into the flame. This results in a cooler fire with cooler smoke. Cooler smoke is heavier and less buoyant, which means it does not rise as easily through the flue. A poorly insulated firebox can therefore create sluggish, smoky fires and increase the likelihood that smoke will spill into the room. Deteriorated firebox mortar joints have the same effect. When joints between firebricks crumble or wash out, the firebox loses its heat-holding capacity. Heat escapes through those gaps into the masonry behind the firebox, lowering the fire's core temperature. Because draft strength is directly related to temperature differences between the flue gases and the outdoor air, the loss of internal heat in the firebox reduces the upward pull of the chimney. Poor joints also allow cold air from behind the firebox to seep inward in some cases, further cooling the fire and the smoke. Cracks in the firebox walls create even greater thermal loss. Cracks act like ventilation channels that allow heat to leak into parts of the chimney structure that were never meant to absorb it. The hotter the masonry outside the firebox becomes, the cooler the firebox interior becomes. This again results in cooler combustion gases, weaker buoyancy, and diminished draft. Additionally, cracks sometimes allow cold outside air or unconditioned air from a crawl space or exterior wall cavity to enter the firebox area. This cold air mixing with the fire lowers the temperature of the rising plume and disrupts the smooth upward flow of smoke. The result is turbulence and backflow at the throat, the exact opposite of what is needed for strong draft. A damaged firebox also delays the process of warming the smoke chamber and flue. When heat is lost into the chimney structure instead of being retained inside the firebox, it takes longer for the flue to reach operating temperature. Until the flue warms up, a cold air plug may remain in place, resisting draft. Fires built in a damaged firebox therefore struggle more with startup draft often smoking heavily for several minutes before the chimney finally warms enough to begin drying properly. All of these issues, missing brick, deteriorated joints, and cracked walls, ultimately reduce the efficiency of the fire itself. A cooler fire produces more particulate matter and heavier smoke, both of which are harder to lift through the chimney. The fire may smolder instead of burn cleanly, producing more creosote and more dense, slow-moving gases. These cooler, dirtier gases will not rise as readily, leaving the fireplace far more prone to smoke spillage and poor performance. In short, the firebox must be structurally sound, well insulated, and fully lined with intact fire brick and refractory mortar to maintain the high temperatures needed for proper draft. When the firebox deteriorates, the chimney loses its thermal engine, and the entire system struggles to operate as intended. When flue tiles are compromised, whether through gaps between sections, misalignment, cracks, missing segments, or protruding mortar, the chimney loses the continuous interior surface it depends on to generate proper draft. The performance of a chimney is not unlike the performance of a straw. It relies on an unbroken, sealed pathway to allow gases to move upward without interruption. If a straw has holes in it, suction is lost because outside air is pulled in. The pressure difference collapses, and the liquid no longer travels the intended direction. A chimney with gaps behaves the same way. Gaps between flue tiles allow heat and pressure to escape into the masonry structure, breaking the suction column that the chimney needs to lift smoke upward. Once this column is compromised, draft becomes weak, inconsistent, or fails entirely. Gaps also expose the rough masonry behind the liner. The moment the smooth tile surface is interrupted, airflow becomes turbulent. Turbulence slows the rising gases and leads to rapid cooling. Cooler gases lose buoyancy, and without buoyancy, draft cannot be maintained. In this sense, the chimney is constantly trying to lift its contents upward, but the holes and rough surfaces act like leaks in a pressurized system, draining the energy that drives upward flow. Misaligned or shifted flue tiles create similar disruptions. When tiles do not form a straight, continuous conduit, they create ledges, steps, or abrupt transitions that interrupt the vertical movement of gases. These internal offsets behave like obstacles inside an airflow channel. As smoke hits these edges, it separates from the surface, loses velocity, and begins swirling. This swirling, or turbulent flow, undermines the chimney's ability to maintain steady upward momentum. These misalignments also encourage soot and creosote accumulation. The edges of misaligned tiles act as shelves where deposits cling and grow. Over time, these deposits reduce the effective size of the flue, increasing airflow resistance and further weakening draft. Cracked flue tiles or missing sections introduce an even more serious problem. A missing piece of tile not only disrupts airflow, but also exposes a large area of the surrounding masonry. Masonry absorbs heat rapidly, and this heat loss cools the rising gases at exactly the moment when they need to remain hot to preserve buoyancy. A chimney with missing tiles therefore loses heat into the walls, making it harder for the chimney to establish draft. In some cases, these openings allow cold outside air to infiltrate the flue cavity. Cold air mixing with hot smoke causes sudden temperature drops, creating downdrafts or back puffing that push smoke back toward the firebox. Mortar protruding into the flue creates localized obstructions. Even a small mortar fin disrupts the smooth interior surface of the flue, increasing drag and slowing the gas stream. These protrusions act like miniature speed bumps, breaking the laminar flow the chimney depends on. As with misaligned tiles, any obstruction becomes a point where creosote and soot can accumulate. As deposits grow, they constrict the flue further, increasing the resistance to airflow and accelerating the decline in draft performance. These defects share a common impact. They destroy the chimney's ability to function as a warm, continuous, aerodynamic passageway. The chimney's draft depends on a steady column of hot, rising gases. Gaps act like holes in a straw. Misalignments create turbulence. Cracks and missing tiles drain heat, and protruding mortar increases friction. Together or individually, these defects weaken the chimney's thermal and aerodynamic efficiency. Once the smooth, sealed surface is compromised, the chimney can no longer sustain the pressure differential needed to lift smoke reliably, and draft problems inevitably follow.